My war wasn't fought with guns or in trenches, but on a 20-foot slab of concrete in a sleepy North Carolina suburb. It was a war I never asked for, a silent, grinding conflict over my own driveway. It began with my new neighbor, a man we'll call Chad, who saw my property not as my home, but as a convenient overflow lot for his personal junk collection. And it ended, gloriously, with him packing a moving truck, a man utterly defeated by the simple, unwavering principle that you do not mess with a woman's sanctuary. I'd poured my life savings and a decade of hard work into this house. It was a modest but lovely single-story home on a quiet, tree-lined street, the kind of place where you know your mail carrier by name. It was my haven, the first piece of the world that was truly, completely mine. With the house came a 2-car driveway, a simple feature, but one that gave me a deep sense of pride. I own a single, sensible Toyota, which I always parked meticulously on the right side. The other half was intentionally left open. It wasn't wasted space, it was possibility. It was for my parents when they visited from out of state, for the UPS driver not to have to block the street, for the simple, clean aesthetic of an uncluttered home. That empty space was a luxury I had earned. Chad moved in next door and seemed to bring a cloud of perpetual grievance with him. He had a driveway identical to mine, but his was an eternal monument to half-finished projects. A sad-looking Mustang sat on jack stands, its tires long gone, surrounded by a sea of oil pans, discarded parts, and general mechanical debris. His own driveway was unusable, so, with a breathtaking sense of entitlement, he simply decided to annex mine. It started insidiously. I'd come home from a long day at work to find his rusty, dented pickup truck occupying my empty spot. The first time, I told myself to be charitable. Maybe he had guests. Maybe he was just moving things around. I'm not a monster. I believe in being a good neighbor. I let it go. But a one-time thing became a twice-weekly occurrence, and soon enough, it was his default parking spot. I'd wake up, look out my kitchen window while my coffee brewed, and there it would be, parked with an air of ownership. A silent, daily reminder that my boundaries meant nothing to him. My reserves of politeness were finally drained on a bright Saturday afternoon. My sister was bringing my niece and nephew over for a barbecue, and I'd told her to just pull right in. When she called me from the street, her voice was laced with confusion. "Hey, I'm here, but I can't get into your driveway. Someone else parked there." I felt a hot flash of shame and anger. They had to park 2 blocks away and walk. After they left, I stewed for an hour, then marched over to his door, my heart hammering with a mixture of nerves and indignation. He opened it, holding a can of Coors Light, and stared at me with an expression of pure vacancy. "Hey, Chad," I began, forcing a pleasant tone. "I was hoping I could talk to you for a second. You've been parking in my driveway pretty regularly, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd stop. I need to keep it open for my family and for deliveries." He took a slow swig of his beer, his eyes unfocused. "Oh, yeah, sure thing, my bad." He gave a lazy, dismissive flick of his hand and started to close the door. There was no apology in his eyes, just a desire to end the interaction as quickly as possible. It was the verbal equivalent of swatting away a fly. Of course, his words were meaningless. The next morning, I looked out my window, and the sight made my blood run cold. His truck was there. It wasn't just parked, it was parked defiantly, perfectly centered in the spot, its dusty bumper practically mocking me. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a message. He was telling me that my request was irrelevant, my ownership of my own property, a triviality he could disregard at will. The polite neighbor in me packed her bags and left. I was done asking. That evening, I drafted a note. It was civil, but the language was deliberately formal and unambiguous. "This is a final, formal request to cease parking your vehicle on my private property. Any vehicle found on this driveway from this point forward will be considered trespassing and will be towed immediately at the owner's full expense. I walked over in the dusk, slid the note securely under his driver's side windshield wiper, and felt a grim sense of satisfaction. It was documented. It was official. The next morning, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I stepped outside, and my heart plummeted. Not only was his truck still parked in my driveway, but my note was lying on my pristine lawn, crumpled into a tight, angry ball. He hadn't just ignored my warning, he had actively disrespected it. He'd made a conscious effort to show me his contempt. That's when the anger turned into something cold and sharp. I stalked over to his house and pounded on the door with the side of my fist. He yanked it open, shirtless and bleary-eyed. "What?" he barked. My voice was low and devoid of any emotion. "Chad, move your truck. Right now. You are trespassing on my property, and I gave you a final warning." He actually laughed. It was a short, ugly, barking sound. "Lady, what is wrong with you? It's an empty slab of concrete. You're not using it. Get a grip. It's not that big of a deal." That was the moment. That was when I understood that I was dealing with a man who operated in a different reality. One where his convenience superseded all rules, laws, and basic human decency. He saw my requests not as a legitimate defense of my home, but as the hysterical nagging of an uptight woman. He didn't respect boundaries because, in his mind, they didn't apply to him. Very well. If he refused to learn from words, he would learn from action and consequence. I turned without another word and went back inside, my mind a whirring engine of strategy. I sat down at my computer and searched for 24-hour towing services in my area. I found a company with stellar reviews and dialed the number. I calmly and clearly explained the situation. A vehicle trespassing on clearly marked private property, with prior warnings given to the owner. The dispatcher was professional and efficient. "Yes, ma'am. As long as it is your deeded property, we have every right to remove it. We can have a truck there in 45 minutes. That 45 minutes was one of the most exquisitely satisfying periods of my adult life. I made a cup of tea and sat in my living room armchair, which had a perfect view of the driveway. I watched, my heart thrumming with anticipation, as a massive flatbed tow truck lumbered down my quiet street. The driver, a burly man who looked like he'd seen it all, hopped out, gave a cursory glance at my house numbers and the property line, and set to work with terrifying efficiency. The sounds of heavy chains, the sickening clank of the hook attaching to the truck's undercarriage, and the high-pitched whine of the winch were music to my ears. In less than 15 minutes, Chad's truck was being ignominiously dragged onto the flatbed. As it pulled away, I felt a wave of righteous triumph, so pure it was almost dizzying. Chad wasn't there to witness the spectacle, which was a pity, but his reaction later that evening was worth the wait. Around 9 p.m., a frantic, furious pounding erupted on my front door. It wasn't a knock. It was a physical assault on the wood. I opened it to find him standing there, his face a blotchy, furious red. "Where's my truck?" he bellowed, flecks of spittle hitting my storm door. I leaned casually against the doorframe, projecting an aura of calm that I knew would infuriate him. "Your truck? Oh, the one that was illegally parked in my driveway. The one I warned you about. I had it towed. Here's the information for the impound lot." I held out a slip of paper with the towing company's name and number neatly written on it. His face twisted into a mask of disbelief and rage. "You can't do that. That's theft. I'm going to call the police on you." A slow smile spread across my face. "Please do, Chad. I sincerely hope you do. You see, I have documentation. I have time-stamped photos of your truck on my property for the last 3 weeks. I have a digital copy of the warning I gave you, and a lovely photo of it crumpled on my lawn. I have a written log of our conversations, including the one this morning, where you explicitly acknowledged you were on my property and refused to leave. So by all means, let's get the authorities involved. I'd love to show them my evidence." The bluster vanished from his face. The threat withered on his tongue. He knew he was caught. He snatched the paper from my hand, shot me a look of the most profound hatred I have ever received, and stomped back to his house, slamming his door with enough force to rattle my windows. I later learned from a sympathetic neighbor that the bill to retrieve his truck, including towing fees, storage, and penalties, was nearly $500. I foolishly believed that such an expensive lesson in property law would be the end of it. I was wrong. Chad wasn't the type to learn. He was the type to escalate. He never parked in my driveway again, but he devised a new, more insidious form of torture. He began parking his truck on the public street, but he positioned it right at the flared edge of my driveway. He left just enough room for me to get out, but only by executing a painstaking, tire-scraping, three-point turn every single time. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression, a daily, calculated reminder of his resentment. He was goading me, hoping I'd come yell at him so he could play the victim. I wasn't going to take the bait. Instead, I got strategic. I spent an evening on my city's government website, poring over the municipal code. And there it was, Section 14, Paragraph 2B. No vehicle shall be parked within 5 feet of the edge of any public or private driveway. He was in direct, measurable violation of a city ordinance. The next morning, his truck was back in its infuriating position. I didn't storm out. I didn't leave another note. I calmly sipped my morning coffee, took a photo with my phone, and called the parking enforcement office. I reported an illegally parked vehicle and cited the specific ordinance. Less than an hour later, a city-branded Prius pulled up. A uniformed officer emerged, took out a measuring tape, and with a satisfied nod, slapped a bright yellow parking ticket under Chad's windshield wiper. I watched from my window and gave a little toast with my mug. When he came out later and saw the ticket, his head snapped in my direction. I just smiled. You would think a $500 tow and a $75 ticket would be sufficient education for one man. But Chad's stubbornness was a thing of wonder. He did it again the next day, so I called again. Another ticket. He did it a third day. Another call, another ticket. By the fourth day, after racking up hundreds of dollars in fines, he finally surrendered. He started parking far down the street, well away from my property. A fragile peace settled. I had won the battle for the driveway, but the war wasn't over. About a week later, I walked outside to go to work and stopped dead. My car was covered in slimy, dripping raw eggs. The yolk was already hardening on the paint and glass, and shattered shells littered the concrete. There was no direct proof, but I knew. I knew with a certainty that was absolute. My first impulse was to unleash hell, to scream and accuse and let all my fury out. But I caught myself. He would just deny it, and it would be my word against his. He had escalated from trespassing to property damage, so I would escalate my defense accordingly. That weekend, I made a trip to Best Buy and made an investment in my own sanity. I bought a high-end, multi-camera 4K security system with color night vision, motion-activated alerts to my phone, and secure cloud storage. I spent all of Saturday afternoon on a ladder, meticulously placing the cameras. One had a perfect, wide-angle view of my entire driveway and front porch. Another was aimed directly at my car. I didn't have to wait long for my investment to pay off. 4 nights later, at 2:15 a.m., my phone buzzed on my nightstand with a motion alert. My heart pounded as I unlocked it and pulled up the live feed. And there he was, rendered in stunning 4K clarity under the eerie green glow of the night vision. Chad. He was sneaking across the lawn, hunched over like a B-movie villain. He approached my Toyota, glanced around furtively, and then knelt down. I watched, utterly transfixed, as he methodically unscrewed the valve stem caps on my tires. I could almost hear the triumphant hiss as he let the air out of all 4 of them. He finished his pathetic act of sabotage, gave one of my now-flat tires a little kick, and scurried back into the shadows of his own house. I saved the clip and watched it 3 more times, a cold, triumphant smile spreading across my face. I had him. It was flawless. It was undeniable. It was beautiful. The next morning, I didn't confront him. I said nothing. I used the portable air compressor I kept in my garage to reinflate my tires, and then I drove directly to the police station. I calmly asked to file a report for vandalism and destruction of property. When the responding officer took my statement, I didn't just tell him my story. I presented him with a flash drive. The entire incident was captured on my security system, I said. The file on this drive is a high-definition video of the man, my neighbor, vandalizing my car. The officer's entire demeanor changed, shifting from routine paperwork to serious police business. He took my report and the flash drive. That afternoon, a patrol car pulled up to Chad's house. From my window, I had a front row seat. I saw the officer knock. I saw Chad answer, his expression confused. I saw the confusion morph into panic as the officer began to speak. I saw him start to deny everything, gesturing wildly, until the officer must have mentioned the video. The transformation was immediate and total. Chad's shoulders slumped. The color drained from his face. All the fight, all the bluster, all the arrogant entitlement just evaporated. He looked, for the first time, like the small, petty man he truly was. That was the end. After the police visit and the resulting criminal charges, Chad became a ghost. He scurried in and out of his house. He never made eye contact. He avoided me at all costs. The cloud of constant, low-grade anxiety that had been hanging over my life for months finally dissipated. But the universe had one final, perfect gift for me. 2 months after his legal troubles began, a beautiful sight appeared on his lawn. A for sale sign. I don't know if it was the court dates, or the humiliation, or simply the misery of living next door to the woman who had so calmly and completely dismantled him. Honestly, I didn't care. A few weeks later, a moving truck pulled into his driveway, the driveway he could have been using all along. On the day he finally left, I was out on my porch watering my hydrangeas. He was hauling the last box to his car. Our eyes met for a brief moment across the lawn. His face was a curdled mess of resentment and defeat. I gave him a small, simple wave, not gloating, just a final goodbye. He just glared, got into his truck, and drove out of my life forever. A month later, a young family moved in. On their first day, the husband, a man named Mark, came over and knocked on my door. "Hi," he said with a genuine, warm smile. "We just wanted to introduce ourselves. And please, let me know if our moving truck is in your way at all. The last thing we want to do is be a bother." I felt a laugh bubble up from my chest, a sound of pure relief. "You're perfectly fine," I said, smiling back. "Welcome to the neighborhood." Later that afternoon, his wife brought over a plate of still-warm chocolate chip cookies. Standing there in my peaceful home, looking out at my clear driveway, I ate a cookie and knew, with absolute certainty, that every moment of the suburban war had been worth it. Chad had picked a fight with the wrong woman, and all he had to show for it was an eviction from his own life. I, on the other hand, got my sanctuary back, and the cookies were amazing.